Thor's hammer, the most iconic weapon in Norse mythology, exists because Loki made a bet with his own head as the stake. Not gold, not treasure. His actual head. It started when Loki, for absolutely no reason, snuck in and shaved Thor's wife completely bald. To save his skin, Loki promised Thor he'd get the dwarves to forge new golden hair. But Loki couldn't resist bragging. He bet his head that the dwarven brothers Brokk and Eitri couldn't make better gifts. Eitri forged while Brokk pumped the bellows. Desperate, Loki transformed into a fly and bit Brokk's eyelid. Blood blinded Brokk, and he let go of the bellows for a split second. Because of that missed pump, Mjolnir's handle came out short. Loki saved his head on a technicality, but Brokk sewed his lips shut instead. And that is how the ultimate weapon was created out of pure chaos. Thor's hammer, the most iconic weapon in Norse mythology, exists because Loki made a bet with his own head as the stake. Not gold, not treasure. His actual head. And by the end of this story, that bet almost got collected, in one of the pettiest, funniest, and most consequence-heavy pranks Loki ever pulled. This is the real story of how Mjolnir was made and how Loki nearly lost everything over it. If you've watched the other videos on this channel, you already know Thor and Loki, the thunder god and the trickster, brothers by bond rather than blood. But this story starts before Thor even has his hammer. Before the weapon that defines him even exists. And the reason it gets made at all comes down to one thing: Loki doing something incredibly stupid, purely for a laugh. It starts with Sif, Thor's wife, known across Asgard for her long, beautiful golden hair so striking it was practically part of her identity. One night, while she slept, Loki, for absolutely no reason beyond his own amusement, snuck in and shaved her head completely bald. No warning, no explanation, just gone by morning. When Sif woke up and realized what happened, and when Thor found out, the reaction was immediate and furious. Thor didn't care about explanations. He grabbed Loki, made it very clear he was about to break every bone in his body, and only stopped when Loki, panicking, swore he could fix this, that he'd go to the dwarves, the finest craftsmen in existence, and get Sif's hair even more beautiful than before. It was a desperate promise, made purely to save his own skin, and it's the reason everything else in this story happens. True to his word, sort of, Loki traveled to Svartalfheim, the underground realm of the dwarves, and sought out a group of dwarven craftsmen known as the Sons of Ivaldi, among the most skilled smiths in the 9 realms. He explained the situation, leaving out the part where this was entirely his own fault, and asked them to forge hair for Sif out of pure gold, hair that would actually grow on her head like real hair once placed there. The dwarves agreed, and being craftsmen who rarely did just one thing at a time, decided to throw in a couple of bonus gifts for the gods while they were at it. Alongside the golden hair, they also forged Skidbladnir, a ship so cleverly built it could be folded up and carried in a pocket, yet unfold to carry all the gods at once, and Gungnir, a spear that would never miss its target once thrown, no matter how it was aimed. Loki had what he came for, more than enough to save himself from Thor's fury. He could have simply gone home. Instead, riding high on the dwarves' impressive work, he made a decision that says everything about his personality. He wandered further into Svartalfheim and found 2 other dwarven brothers, Brokk and Eitri, and started bragging. He told them the items the Sons of Ivaldi had just made were obviously the finest craftsmanship possible, and matched by anyone. Brokk, insulted on behalf of his own skills, disagreed completely, and Loki, never one to back down from stirring up trouble, offered a bet: if Brokk and Eitri could make 3 gifts better than what he'd just received, Loki would let them take his head as payment. If they failed, they'd get nothing. Brokk agreed immediately, and just like that, Loki had gambled his own head on a competition he had absolutely no control over. Brokk and Eitri got straight to work in their forge. Eitri handled the actual smithing, while Brokk worked the bellows, keeping the fire at the exact right heat throughout. Before starting, Eitri gave Brokk one clear instruction: don't stop pumping the bellows, no matter what happens, until he says the piece is finished. Interrupt the process even once, and the item would be ruined. Loki, realizing this competition might not go the way he'd hoped, decided he needed to sabotage it if he wanted to keep his head. So he transformed into a fly, small enough to slip in completely unnoticed, and while Brokk worked the bellows, Loki landed directly on his arm and bit down as hard as he could. It clearly hurt. But Brokk, gritting through the pain and remembering Eitri's warning, kept pumping without stopping. When Eitri finally pulled the piece from the fire, it was Gullinbursti, a golden boar with bristles so bright it could light up the darkest night, and fast enough to outrun any horse across land, sea, or sky. One gift down, undamaged despite Loki's interference. Eitri placed a new piece of gold into the forge for the second item, and gave Brokk the same instruction: keep the bellows going no matter what. Loki, unwilling to give up after one failed attempt, transformed into the fly again, and this time landed directly on the back of Brock's neck, biting down even harder than before, right into skin already raw and stinging from the first bite. The pain must have been genuinely brutal, but Brokk, gripping the bellows tightly, refused to stop again, forcing himself through it with sheer stubbornness. When Eitri lifted the completed piece from the flames, it was Draupnir, a golden arm ring with a remarkable property. Every 9th night, it would produce 8 new rings of equal weight and quality, endlessly multiplying wealth from nothing to flawless creations, and Loki was running out of chances. For the third and final piece, Eitri placed iron into the forge, this one meant to be the most impressive of all, a hammer capable of striking with unstoppable force and always finding its way back to its owner's hand after being thrown. But this time, Eitri warned Brokk more seriously than before. This piece was more delicate to craft than the others, and any interruption at all could ruin it completely. Loki, desperate now, transformed into the fly one final time, and instead of biting Brock's arm or neck, went straight for his eyelid, biting down with everything he had. Blood ran into Brock's eye almost immediately, blinding him on one side, the pain sharper than anything before it. Instinctively, without thinking, Brokk let go of the bellows for just a fraction of a second to wipe the blood away, before immediately grabbing them again and continuing. When Eitri finally pulled the hammer from the fire, it was extraordinary, capable of hitting with devastating force, always returning to the wielder's hand, shrinkable to fit inside a pocket when not in use. But there was one flaw. Because of that single missed pump of the bellows, the handle had come out shorter than intended, meaning the hammer could only ever be swung with one hand instead of two. Even damaged, it was still clearly the most powerful weapon any of them had ever seen. With all 3 items finished, Brokk and Loki traveled together to Asgard, where the gods gathered to judge which set of gifts was truly superior: Loki's items from the Sons of Ivaldi, or Brokk and Eitri's creations. Loki presented his gifts first. To Odin, he gave Gungnir, the spear that never missed. To Freyr, he gave Skidbladnir, the ship that folded into a pocket yet carried every god at once. And to Thor, he gave the golden hair for Sif, which took root and grew exactly like real hair the moment it touched her head, fully repairing the damage Loki himself had caused in the first place. Impressive gifts, by any standard. Then Brokk presented his set. To Freyr, he gave Gullinbursti, the glowing golden boar faster than any horse. To Odin, he gave Draupnir, the ring that endlessly multiplied gold every 9th night. And finally, to Thor, he presented the hammer, which Brokk named Mjolnir on the spot. He explained its power plainly, capable of striking anything with unstoppable force, always returning to Thor's hand no matter how far it was thrown, small enough to be tucked away when not needed. The only flaw, he admitted honestly, was the shortened handle, meaning it would always need to be wielded one-handed. The gods deliberated, weighing gift against gift. Gungnir was powerful, but a spear was just a spear, however accurate. Draupnir created endless wealth, which was valuable, but wealth alone didn't defend Asgard from anything. Skidbladnir was clever and convenient, but ultimately just transportation. Gullinbursti was fast and impressive, but decorative more than practical in a fight. And then there was Mjolnir, a weapon capable of protecting Asgard itself from giants, monsters, and any threat that might come from beyond its walls, flaw and all. In the end, the gods ruled that Brokk and Eitri's gifts were superior, with Mjolnir specifically cited as the deciding factor. Loki had lost the bet, which meant By the terms he'd agreed to himself, Brokk was now owed his head. Loki, predictably, had no intention of actually paying up. The moment the gods ruled against him, he turned and bolted, using a pair of magical shoes that let him run across both land and sea at incredible speed, vanishing before Brokk could grab him. Brokk, furious at being cheated out of what he was rightfully owed, turned to Thor and asked him directly to catch Loki and drag him back to face the consequences. Thor, who by this point had very little sympathy left for Loki after everything that had already happened with Sif's hair, agreed without much hesitation. He tracked Loki down, caught him easily despite the enchanted shoes, and hauled him back in front of Brokk to finally settle the debt. With Loki cornered and out of options, Brokk raised his weapon, fully prepared to collect on the bet exactly as agreed Loki's head, no exceptions. But Loki, thinking fast even with his life on the line, pointed out a technicality. The bet had been for his head specifically, not his neck, and not one drop of his blood. If Brokk tried to take the head, he'd inevitably have to cut through the neck first, which was never part of the original deal. It was a ridiculous, almost insulting argument, but according to the exact wording of the bet Brokk himself had agreed to, it was also technically accurate. Brokk, unable to find a way around the loophole without breaking the terms himself, was furious but stuck. He couldn't take the head without touching the neck, and the bet hadn't accounted for that at all. Unable to collect the head itself, Brokk settled for the next best thing he could legally justify. Since Loki had talked his way out of the punishment, Brokk decided his mouth was the real problem, and resolved to sew his lips shut instead. He tried to pierce Loki's lips with his knife to thread them closed, but found the blade wouldn't cut through skin sharp enough to do the job properly. So he sent for his brother Eitri's awl, a sharp tool used for punching holes in leather during their smithing work, and used that instead to pierce through Loki's lips. With the holes made, Brokk threaded a leather cord through them, and sewed Loki's mouth completely shut, leaving him silenced, humiliated, and unable to talk his way out of anything for as long as it stayed in place. It's one of the few times in Norse mythology where Loki's greatest weapon, his voice, was literally taken away from him as punishment. Loki eventually worked the stitches free on his own, and life in Asgard continued, treasures in hand. Thor kept Mjolnir, which despite its shortened handle became the single most iconic weapon in all of Norse mythology, the thing most associated with him from that point forward in every story that followed. Odin kept Gungnir and Draupnir, both becoming permanent symbols of his authority and wealth. Freyr kept Skidbladnir and Gullinbursti, both useful gifts even if less legendary than Thor's hammer. And Sif, whose stolen hair started this entire chain of events, got her golden hair back, fully grown and arguably more remarkable than what she'd lost in the first place, thanks entirely to the chaos Loki himself had caused. What's genuinely interesting about this myth is how much it reveals about every character involved, almost by accident. Loki starts the entire chain of events through pure pettiness, nearly loses his head through his own overconfidence, and only survives through a technicality he invents on the spot. Pure Loki, start to finish. Thor, meanwhile, ends up with the weapon that will define him in every future story, not because he sought it out or earned it through some heroic quest, but purely as fallout from someone else's stupid decision. And even the flaw in Mjolnir of the shortened handle exists specifically because of Loki's sabotage, meaning the most powerful weapon in Norse mythology carries a permanent physical reminder of the chaos that created it. A few details worth knowing: Mjolnir's shortened handle is actually referenced again later in mythology, explaining why Thor sometimes struggles to use it in specific situations requiring a longer reach. Draupnir, the self-multiplying ring, later plays a role in an entirely different, much sadder myth involving Odin's son Balder. And Gungnir, Odin's spear, becomes so associated with him that oaths sworn on its tip were considered unbreakable throughout Norse tradition, treated with the same seriousness as swearing on a god's own name. So next time you see Thor swinging Mjolnir like it's always belonged to him, remember it exists because Loki shaved someone's head as a prank, tried to weasel out of the consequences, and accidentally created the most legendary weapon in Norse mythology along the way. Even the flaw in the handle is basically Loki's fingerprint left on it forever. If you want the next video to cover what Draupnir actually does later, during the story of Baldr's death, Let me know in the comments, that one's coming soon either way.